All right, you guys. The beauty of technology, right? We're able to go through this stuff even when we don't get to see each other. So we're starting off here at 10.1. So we're going to cover all of chapter 10, but let's start here with 10.1. All right. 10.1 is a lot of just information, right? So here's the vocabulary associated with this chapter so that you can go forward with your 10.2 and 10.3. So let's take a look here. For students who first enrolled in a 2-year public institution in a recent semester, the proportion, so all of these words make an impact, who earned a bachelor's degree within 6 years was the 3.389. The president of a certain college believes that the proportion, again, there's that word, of students who enroll in her institution have a lower. All right. So statistics is all about these words that we have going for us here, right? So because of that, that's going to help determine our null and alternative hypotheses. So our null hypothesis is what we start with. That's always the information we're given. If it says mean, you're going to use that mu symbol, right? That looks like a U. This says proportion, so we're going to use a P. The null hypothesis is always, always, always equal to that value because it's what we know. It's what we already have in our wheelhouse. The alternative is what I'm saying of, oh, well, I already know this null to be true, but what if, right? It's a hypothesis. So I'm coming up with the what if situation here. Well, what if my probability is less than my proportion, is less than 0.389, right? And you get the words right out of there, right out of your problem where it says lower. There's your symbol, your value. It says the word proportion. All of that comes right out of your problem. Okay, now I can have this null and alternative hypotheses. Oh my. Oops, let's try again, shall we? I can have this null and alternative hypotheses, but with this, I can also make errors. So here's the real question. Which of the following is a type 1 error? So we can have a type 1 error and a type 2 error. So just like right out of your homework, these are going to be multiple choice. So whenever you look at this, you're looking at that type 1 error. All right? And that's going to be this one. The president rejects the hypothesis that the proportion of the students who earn a bachelor's degree is that, when in fact it is true. Type 1 is when I reject the null, right? I'm saying that's not valid, when in fact it absolutely is. All right, so you're rejecting that null hypothesis. That's a type 1 error, when in fact it is true. So my status quo, what I start with here at the beginning, ends up being very true, but I reject it anyway. That's a type 1 error. Type 2 error is just the opposite, right? So my type 2 error is when the president fails to reject the hypothesis, that the proportion of students who earn a bachelor's degree within 6 years is blah, 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 when in fact it is less than. So here's the verbiage, and we're going to look at that here again real quick. There's a lot of negative verbiage that goes with this. So they're saying, I reject, fail to reject. This is the verbiage that we're looking for. You have something to begin with. If you do all of your work and you figure out, hey, guess what? My new evidence is telling me this changes. So I'm not going to look back to what I started with originally. My hypothesis is legit and it's going to change my mind. That's when you reject. All right? It's not true. I have new evidence to support a new finding, not what I currently have. That's when you reject what you currently have. If your evidence isn't enough to support what it is you're currently doing, then you keep it. You do not reject. If I don't have enough evidence to change my mind, you do not reject. You keep that status quo. All right? So that's where your errors come in. Okay. Now here's the other verbiage. Oops. Sorry. I jumped the gun here. Here it is. So here's the other verbiage. So suppose the null is rejected. All right, the null is rejected. We're going to state the conclusion based on the results of this test. So the null is rejected. 6 years ago, 12.3% of registered births were to teenage mothers. A sociologist believes that the percentage has increased since then. So if my null is rejected, that means you are changing my mind. You're changing my mind. You have enough evidence. And let me write it over here. There is enough evidence to change my mind. That's what you're doing right now. So I'm rejecting what my original thought was because I have enough evidence. That means there is sufficient evidence. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one there. I saw there was sufficient evidence and I got excited about it. There is sufficient evidence to conclude that the percentage has increased. Here's the thing that I want to point out. That verbiage will always be the same. This one that I almost chose accidentally says remain the same. It's whatever words are used, those are the same words that are used. All right, so heads up on that. Okay, what happens if, like on this one, 3 years ago, the mean price of the single-family home was $243,713. A real estate broker believes that the mean price decreased since then, and my hypothesis is not rejected. All right? That means there is not enough evidence. To change my mind. There's not enough evidence. It is not rejected. It holds true, right? There's not enough to change my mind. So there is not sufficient evidence. And then again, I'm looking at those words, right? To conclude that it has decreased. You just match those words up. All right, so in 10.1, look for those words. Those words make that impact. All right, in 10.2, we're going to start performing some tests next.